So this Redmi Note 11S is currently starting at a price of only 899 ringgit. It has a 90Hz AMOLED display and a 5000 milliamps of battery, and above all, a massive 108 megapixel camera on this phone. But are all of this just numbers? Is there any other limitations on this phone, or is this phone too good to be true? Now, since I've already done the unboxing in my first impressions video, as a recap, here are the specs of the phone, and feel free to pause this video if you want to see the exact variants available as well. First, let's talk about the build quality and the design. Now, first of all, I have to say that I really love this new approach that Redmi has done by giving us an all matte finish. Not only for the back, but also for the sides of the phone as well. And because of this all-around matte finish, all around the smartphone, it is a great phone to use daily, especially when it comes to watching videos on the phone for a very long time, and also gaming as well. Now, since the phone has a plastic finish, do expect a quite light phone at 179 grams, but of course it's not as light compared to the likes of the Xiaomi 11 Lite 5G NE, because this has a bigger battery. Now, as a recap once again, this phone is an IP53 splash proof rated, so you're looking at a decently durable phone. And besides the good looks, as I mentioned in my first impressions video, I love how the phone not only has a micro SD card slot expansion, but also has a headphones jack as well. And call me old school, but I really feel that this too features the headphones jack and also the micro SD card slot is definitely a very welcoming feature on any smartphone. Now, as for the phone screen, it comes with a 6.43-inch AMOLED FHD Plus dot display with up to a 90Hz non-adaptive display, and it has a FHD Plus resolution of 1080 by 2400 pixels. And I still stand by my words during my first impressions video that the phone has a very good looking screen, surely surpasses the previous generation Redmi Note devices. Now, the screen was quite bright outdoors during the day, but I wouldn't count it to be superbly visible during a very strong harsh afternoon sunlight, but it was still decently visible indeed. Now, from daily driving the phone both during the day or even without the dark mode turned on, it was nice in both situations, whether or not you're using the phone in a brightly lit area or even a darker environment as well. Now, watching YouTube and also on Netflix on the phone was a really pleasant experience from a display point of view, but I was not a fan of the speakers though, because although it is a stereo dual speakers, but I did find that the earpiece speaker was not as loud as the speakers down over here. But of course, considering its price, I'm willing to let that go. And also worth mentioning is that the fact that the Widevine L1 Full HD playback is the playback specification on Netflix, and then there's also the SGS iCare display certification as well. Very beneficial, especially if you're the kind of person who looks at your phone screen for a very long time. Now, in terms of the cameras, of course, the rear camera, as mentioned, has a huge 108 megapixel lens, an 8 megapixel ultra wide angle lens, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth camera. Then the front camera comes with a 16 megapixel f2.2 aperture lens. So is there any compromises on the phone's cameras, and is this 108 megapixel lens just a gimmick? Well, based on my pictures taken on the phone, starting from the high megapixel mode, the overall colors produced was really good. And of course, since it has a huge resolution up to 12,000 pixels, this is of course perfect for situations where you want to crop in into the images as well. Now, as for the ultra-wide lenses, the colors were quite consistent with the high megapixel mode, so that was nice. And the focal length was pretty wide, but not too extremely wide, which I liked as there was no barrel distortion on the edges. And to keep the consistency of the colors going, it was the same when it comes to the main lenses, where it had just the right amount of saturation, and the dynamic range was also really good, especially when taking photos during a very bright, high exposed areas in the skies. Now you can zoom up to 2 times, and of course that is through the digital way of zooming, which was pretty nice, and it also allows you to go up to 10x as well, or 10 times zoom. And while the images on the 10 times zoom was somewhat okay, but I personally would not use them anyway. And the portrait mode on human subjects, or me for this case, was quite amazing thanks to the depth camera lens, and it had a nice subject to background blur, and the edge detection was also quite flawless. And the same could be said when it comes to objects as well, where the portrait shots on the phone did look like it came out from a flagship phone. However, the same cannot be said for the phone's macro mode though, because not only it was extremely difficult to get focus in this macro mode, and there were quite a number of times where the colors were totally off. And for me, if you're looking for a smartphone which has a very good macro mode, there are other Xiaomi phones which could do that, because I wouldn't recommend this phone when it comes to the overall macro shots, at least before the next update comes. Now, as for the night modes on the phone, I found it a little peculiar because there was no night mode for the ultra-wide lenses, so you will need to take a non-night mode shot in order to use the ultra-wide lenses. However, I really love how the main lenses on the night mode shots looked, as they had great highlights and amazing dynamic range in the shadows as well. Now, speaking of looking like a flagship photo, the selfie shots on the phone is surely one of the best that I've seen on any smartphone within this price range, with amazing skin tones, the amount of dynamic range when it comes to both the regular and also the portrait selfie shots as well. And I actually put this particular portrait selfie image in my Instagram story, and I did a poll on asking people to guess what smartphone it was taken on, and about 99% of them answered that it was taken on Samsung's new S22 Ultra. Yep, true story. And when it comes to video recording, there was a single shot coming, but of course very understandable because of the price range once again, as it records up to only 1080p at 30 frames per second, both for the rear and also for the front as well. But I have to say that the quality was still great, with nice dynamic range, especially in the sky area, and it's also really sweet to know that the image stabilization for the ultra-wide and also the main lenses was really good too. Now, what's interesting is there is the macro video mode too, which for the life of me, I don't even know why it exists, because it can only record up to 720p, and the video footage was shaky, the overall colors were a bit crazy, and the overall exposure was also not consistent too. Now, while the front video camera recorded at the same resolution, I was very impressed from the dynamic range point of view, and of course the image stabilization as well, where it was really flawless, especially knowing the fact that it can record up to only 1080p 30 frames per second. And of course, here is a vlogging test or an audio video recording test for the Redmi Note 11S. So let's check it out. Okay, so this is a video audio recording test on the front camera. One thing that I noticed is that the dynamic range on the sky is not blown down like how it usually is for a mid-range smartphone or even a mid-range entry-level phone. And I'm very impressed with how much of a dynamic range. The time right now is about 1:08 PM, and it is super bright. And usually when it comes to a smartphone within this price range, you would totally see everything blown out, and I'm really impressed by the camera performance, although it does record on 1080p. So guys, with this, do let me know what you think of the camera's performance. Is it good or is it just a gimmick? Do let me know at the comment section below. And while you guys are at it, if you guys are enjoying this video so far, a nice big thumbs up would be very much appreciated. And of course, a subscription would be very lovely too. Thank you in advance. Now, as for the phone software, the Redmi Note 11 series was the first phone from Xiaomi that came shipped with MIUI version 13 but still currently on Android 11. And as of the recording of this video and during this review period, I was at MIUI version 13.0.4, just so you all know. And I have to admit that I was a little disappointed with the overall new version of the MIUI version 13 because there was almost no visual or menu aesthetic change made to this new skin, except for this sidebar over here, which did come in handy for certain situations. But I wouldn't consider this as a major change or an upgrade on an Android skin. However, I have to say that from an experience point of view when using the phone from a software's perspective, it seems like it is totally not buggy anymore when it comes to opening a bunch of apps. Multitasking, loading websites was indeed very smooth, and this could be also because of the additional 3GB of RAM on top of the 8GB of RAM that is inside of the phone. But of course, my surprise on my initial worry about this 12nm MediaTek Helio G96 chipset is something that I was very happy to note, pun intended. There was no issue at all when using the phone daily, especially when it comes to heavier multitasking. So yes, it is nice that from a performance level, it has improved a lot. Everything was great, but of course, I would love to have a more visual representation of a change like the menu, like I mentioned. You know, there's so many other Android skins which still looks way better. And I guess we need to wait for the next MIUI 14 or any other update. We'll just have to wait and see. Alright, when it comes to the battery capacity, the Redmi Note 11S has a pretty big 5000 mAh of battery, where I found it extremely difficult to drain the phone's battery, where even close to an hour of screen on time usage, I barely even went down about less than 10%. And I even intentionally left the phone at light mode instead of dark mode when I was using the phone daily, simply because I had that sort of confidence where it will last longer than expected on an average of 1.5 days to 2 days, or even sometimes more depending on your daily usage. So yes, the battery life alone on the phone would be one of the highly recommended reasons to get the Redmi Note 11S. And of course, this is on light mode instead of dark mode, so you can even save more when it comes to using the phone every single day. Now, what's extra sweet is also the fast charging performance, because not only inside of the box comes with a 33-watt charger, which is the current highest level that the phone can charge, but the claim faster charging up to 26% is indeed true, because I tried the same 33-watt charger which comes inside the Xiaomi 11 Lite 5G NE, and there was a difference in terms of the charging speed on that, thanks to the MMT technology charging that is included in this Redmi Note 11S. Now, let's talk about gaming. And here's where I found there is probably some limitations and probably not a smartphone that is catered for a typical hardcore mobile gamer. Starting with PUBG, while everything ran smooth and nice, there were absolutely no overheating issues when it comes to playing games continuously up to 2 hours straight. Now, this is because there is a slight compromise over here when it comes to the graphic and the frame rate, as the graphics could only go up to a maximum settings of HD and the frame rate only maxes out at high. So if that is fine with you when it comes to the compromise on the graphics and the frame rate, then yes, you will totally enjoy a lag-free experience when it comes to playing PUBG Mobile on the phone. Now, while I understand that this 12nm chipset is not meant for heavy games like Genshin Impact, but just for the sake of testing it out. With medium settings at 60 frames per second with motion blur turned off, the initial gameplay up to 20 minutes was totally fine, and then you might experience the occasional micro lag, but not too frequent. So our advice is to kind of set the game on the lowest setting on Genshin Impact if you want to have a proper experience on the phone. And as mentioned in the build quality segment earlier, that this phone was such a pleasure to play games on for a very long time due to the slight curved edges and of course the overall matte finish. So if your question still remains about if you should get the Redmi Note 11S, well, there is a certain compromise that comes together with the phone, like the video resolution recording limits, the graphic limits during gameplay, which honestly might only be something that a huge tech nerd like me, Lihood, or probably you who is watching would matter the most compared to the average Joe or the ordinary Jane, as this limitation wouldn't really matter to them since the phone comes with a starting price of only 899 ringgit for the 6 plus 64GB version and just 999 ringgit for the exact variant that I have with me, which is the 8GB of RAM with 128GB of storage variant. And I humbly think that this is indeed a smartphone that I would recommend, especially within the 1000 ringgit price range or below the 1000 ringgit price range. And speaking of the Redmi Note 11 series, I do have the 11 Pro 5G with me right now. So do subscribe to Adam Lobo TV if you haven't done so, and I'll see you in my next video.